Hello, and welcome to the Sisterhood of the Traveling Paperbacks, a cheerful and irreverent book club podcast all about genre fiction, fandom, and the things that make us happy. My name is Chelsea, and I'm coming to you guys from Midwest United States.
My name's Claire, and I'm coming to you from London in the UK.
My name's Kay, and I'm coming to you from the surface of the sun, also known as Phoenix, Arizona.
And today, on our very first official episode, we are going to be talking about what we're currently reading and then discussing The Dispossessed by Ursula K Le Guin.
Both of these things are very exciting.
Very exciting.
Yes.
So, Claire, why don't you hit us with what you're currently reading?
So currently I have a few different things on the go. I have a couple of audiobooks that I'm listening to. Mary Roach.
I love her. On audio is great too.
Yeah.
I should point out we're recording this in December, so I'm totally not reading that by the time you're listening to this podcast. But I am also currently reading the Encrypted series by Shauna Maguire and flailing about how much I love it. Because it's really great.
We all love Sean in here.
Yeah. Very good choice.
Okay. So I am reading way too many things, and most of them are your guys' fault. And also Renee, if any of you listen to the Fangirl Happy Hour podcast.
Much love for Renee and Anna.
We love those guys, but they're also really bad for our TBRs. So this month I've been listening to the Expanse series. So the first one, I heavily subtweeted how much I was not loving that book because, oh my God, there are basically
Is that the one you were
no
talking about with all
women
the
in that.
dudes? Yeah.
Yes. What was it? Men failing at everything, a space opera is how I've been referring to that book.
Have you listened to the latest Fangirl Happy Hour? Because they totally referenced that.
They did, and I tweeted Renee, and I was like, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to subtweet you, just the book. Because now I'm on the second one. So the first one's Leviathan Wakes, and it's really mediocre. I'm sorry to all the people who love that series. There's too many dudes, there's basically no ladies, and it's just a shame. And there's a really creepy dude stuff going on. We'll not get into it. But now I'm on Caliban's War. I'm halfway in, and it's so good. And there's multiple awesome lady characters, and I want to be all of them when I grow up. So that is much better. Renee is right. You have to get through the slog of the first book, and then it gets good.
Okay.
So the first series of Parks and Rec.
Basically,
Yeah,
the first season.
Pretty much. So that's what I've been reading lately.
Well, I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I'm not actually getting paid by Kit Roca for advertising, so I don't think I can talk about it anymore. But I did just finish up the Beyond series. I have one more book left that by the time this goes out will already be out, the last book in the series.
Released
so I'm saving
December
that.
13th.
Yes, December 13th release day. I am both equal parts really excited, but also really sad. So in the meantime, I switched gears 110% from dystopian erotica to middle grade.
I just love that.
Yeah, it's great. But I am judging the some middle grade and young adult book awards in the Kansas City area coming up in about the middle of January.
Very exciting.
It's going to be so exciting. So I am reading through some of the nominees. I just finished The Best Man by Richard Peck, which was so cute. It's all about this young boy who has to deal with his best friend is a girl and he's in the 6th grade. So he's having some problems reconciling this, and he gets a substitute teacher who is gay, and there's a hate, a very, very mild hate crime, but then this gay substitute teacher swoops in and teaches tolerance, and then falls in love with the boy's uncle, and they get married. And you guys, I just have a lot of feelings.
You can't
about this
see us,
book.
but we're all making flailing hand motions.
I know. It's called The Best Man by Richard Peck.
We're gonna link everything in show notes.
Yeah, Claire is clearly already on a Goodreads mission, but there will be links in the show notes to Goodreads and probably also to Amazon so that you can pick it up if that is your retailer
everything
of
we
choice.
mention.
Yes. Yeah. But that's kind of what I'm currently reading. And I think that then takes us into The Dispossessed, which we are super excited to talk about.
Yay, our first book club book.
Yay!
Yay! This book. Yay!
So we kind of have been arguing about whether or not we even need to intro this book because this is going to be super spoiler heavy. So if you're listening to us now, you need to have read the book at this point. Like, I'm telling you, exit out, really go to the next timestamp. Like, we're just going to, like, get right into spoilers.
Yeah, there's really no way to talk about this book.
You should read it because it's amazing.
Yes.
Like, so if you haven't read it, stop listening to us and go get this book.
Yeah.
Although I'm gonna, float something here, is that I don't think this is a book you really read for, like, the surprises in the plot. I think you should know what happens in it. And still read it and get as much from it because
it's beautiful and life-changing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And not all that much really happens in terms of, like, action-y bits.
Which is,
there's not, like, crazy twists or anything in it.
I just had an argument with my dad about this book because he did not finish it. And he was like, it was really boring, nothing happened. And I was like, I guess if you're one of those people who does not read for character development and, like, it's, like, kind of sociocultural anthropology stuff and he doesn't like that. He just, like, wants a plot. He reads a lot of thrillers.
But the prose.
So he's like, it's boring. I know. It's so beautiful.
Which, I mean, to be fair, if you're going into this book, like, expecting, like, sci-fi alien adventures, like, you're... Like, yes, it will be boring if that's what you're expecting. Like, it's not boring, but you will be bored if you're expecting, like, the Michael Bay version of a science fiction novel. Because, like,
now I'm wondering who recommended this book to my dad. Because I point blank have told him, don't read any Le Guin. You won't like it. So I don't know who handed him this book, because it was a terrible idea.
But if we were trying to summarize this book, I think Communism in Space, which I think is pretty much it.
I mean,
that's, if I had to elevator pitch it, that's pretty
anarcho-communism.
That's pretty much how I do it.
Yeah, are we getting specific about that? I think, like, Claire would be better with, like, the actual politics stuff than me.
I think it's really interesting that in the book they actually seem to be talking about that as well. They never mention the word communist. They always define themselves as anarchists, and they think in a very anarchical way, and they're very focused on the individual. They do talk about community sometimes, but that seems to be often viewed as, like, something oppressive, but their way of living is very communal. I mean,
yeah, it's this idea that if the individual assumes responsibility for caring for the individual, then as a group of individuals, the population will be taken care of because each part of the puzzle is taking care of itself, which, like, kind of, but also not, because that implies or requires that every citizen do all of the things that they're required to do in the same manner, or the system kind of falls apart.
But it doesn't really, because you see it modeled within their society that they do kind of what they're good at, and they do this, like, every 10-day communal work that's, like, menial, that not everybody wants to be doing all the time. But still, they seem to be modeling very closely from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, which is, like, Marxism,
Which I think one of the driving forces for the action, right, is when the society fails to actually live up to that. Because,
exactly.
Like, when the people are not being allowed to do the jobs that they are good at and trained for and want to be doing, is kind of how everything gets kicked into motion.
Because that shift takes place because there are individuals within the system who, because of various things, want that power and decide that for themselves they want to take unofficial
Humanity tends
power
toward
forms.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah,
like, there's, like,
so,
basically, like, a line like that, right?
Basically. And so then those people, even if they're not officially given power by the state or whatever we're calling it, is they are still functioning as kind of, they become gatekeepers and make the assignments of who is doing what in a way that is forced de facto. Like, it's this situation, right, of choice without choice. Like, yeah, you could leave, you could do whatever, you could just go loaf around, but because of the societal dictates and norms, like, that's not really a choice.
And because they're on a moon, like, they, like, have such limited resources.
Yeah, there's two things. There's the fact that they have limited resources, and there's also the fact that Shevek says at some point, you could go and loaf around, but you'll get beaten up by people in the town, which is just like, whoa!
But, like, that's the choice, right? Like, you could, if you're willing to deal with an ass kicking, like, there's no law preventing you from going and doing that.
And there's
but
also
there's also no formalized state.
Well, and he's like, not necessarily are they always gonna get beat up, but, like, they'll be shunned basically by everyone else. So you're basically going to be like a forced hermit if you refuse to like take your assignments is basically what happens, which also sucks and is terrible.
Yeah. Especially in a society where so much of it is communally appropriated and there is no centralized state, like the ultimate punishment becomes ostracism from the community.
And that's what drives Shevek back to the planet in the end, is that he wants to go back to Anaris because he wants to go to his people again, who have the same kind of mentality as him. And also, a lot is made throughout the entire book of the lack of material, physical possessions.
Yes.
You know, he came as always with his hands empty, or whatever the final line is, you know. There's nothing apart from the community and the people, you know? And
that's it was such a weird experience reading Shevek's kind of cultural assimilation. Like when he gets his own room and
it seems
feeling
decadent.
through him that, that like foreignness of having your own room and your own bathroom. And it's decadent, but also it's ostracizing because he's coming from a place where being alone like that is not a good thing. That's not something people actually really want to have happen.
Exactly.
Whereas where I'm like, shut the doors, give me my room, solitude, like, yes, please. Yes. But it's just such a different...
Like, cutting yourself off from the social organism is, like, frowned upon, even though there's nothing saying that they have to socialize or anything. And then he makes, like, a conscious decision to argue with himself, basically. Is this worth it for me to be cutting myself off if it is better for my work? And he makes a decision it is better for his physics work for him to like cut himself off, which it's not great for him in other ways because he does get like violently ill and bad things happen. But
yeah, that was fun though. Those like crazy trip and fever dreams, that was fun.
It does bring up the interesting family dynamic stuff going on because his mom shows up when he's sick, right, in the ward, because they don't have the traditional family setup in this anarcho-communist society. Some people will keep their children with them for a while, but mostly the children are raised communally. But then you have different, feelings about parents, and you don't like know about siblings because everyone is your brother or sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's reflected a lot in the language as well, where, like, when he speaks to Rulag at some point and they decide that that's it, they never had a mother-to-son bond and they're not gonna have that, they are on the same level and they talk to each other as if brother to sister and try to, like, ignore this whole thing, but it keeps coming back again and again and again because they have this, like, closer connection that they refuse to acknowledge of like this burden of guilt and kind of bitchiness from the abandonment and stuff. And all of it is reflected in the language and not just the brother-sister thing, but like the article thing, the fact that there's no possessives. It's all like, oh, she's the mother. And
I love
you
that.
have to...
Yeah, there is no my. Yeah.
Which we have not mentioned it yet because it's kind of just like a part of everything. They have their own language. They made up their own language because, it needed to go along with their beliefs. They could not have possessiveness and like the linguistic stuff. And this is really cool. I'm just kind of incoherent about it because I love it.
No, it's just like the power of language. Like if you don't create a word for personal ownership, if you don't have a word for that idea, you can kind of stomp out that idea as an essential tenet, like as an existent, just by not having words for it, or by not having words for a thing, you don't give access and power to that thing. Like I think it's funny that the worst word you can be called in that society is a propertarian, obviously with roots to property and personal ownership, which like, I mean, you could walk up to somebody today and call them a propertarian. And you would get, most people wouldn't know what you were talking about, like wouldn't actually realize what you had said to them.
And that's what happens when he talks to the people on Uras and calls them that, and they're like, they don't realize they've just been mortally insulted.
Yeah, they're like, oh, okay, what a cute word.
I love that it's hard to swear. And is it Pravik? Is that, how do you say that word?
I think so.
Pravik. It's like difficult to swear because if you're not placing like a value on certain things like we would, like motherfucker is not going to be like an insult that you can use because like there's not even really a word. Yeah. There's not even like, isn't the word for fuck kind of weird? Am I remembering that wrong?
Oh yeah, no, that was great. There's no,
because there's a word to like procreate, like to have a baby, but there's no word for like the kind of like passionate, carnal,
there's no like
possessiveness
possessive
of just
words
like,
about it. Like you do not have a woman because like you don't have things.
And
like,
the thing is that the word that they have for having a woman in like a possessive sense is super rapey for them.
Yeah.
Like they have a word for fucking in a way that's like a very like possessive, passionate, carnal, blah blah blah. That is kind of that, but it's rape.
Rapey, yeah, basically.
So that's like.
Do we want to use this point to talk about The Thing?
Oh god, I forgot The Thing was a thing.
The like one thing that Chelsea and I spent like half an hour talking about this.
Yeah, there's one scene in this book that is
horrifying.
Shevik attempting a sexual assault on another person. There is no actual rape. It's very kind of dry humpy, but if like that is something that is going to bother you, just know going into it, there is a scene of attempted sexual assault. Having said that,
yeah, it's definitely complicated because the person he is involved with has made sexual advances towards him before and has purposefully gotten him intoxicated at a party to amuse people. This is not excusing his behavior at all.
No.
But it's, you know, context.
No, but I think it's also really interesting to look at the fact that she wants to have sex with him, but not right now for reasons that he is unable to understand. Like, her reasons are, like, I need to take... And I mean, her reasons are valid and he should just go away when she says no, which she does repeatedly. But... her reasons are things that he's, like, unable to understand. Like, she wants to take contraception so that her husband can't know that she slept with somebody else. And so, like, that's something that's completely foreign to him. And again, it's just no excuse at all, but I think it's really interesting to see. It doesn't make sense to him that this would happen in this way, and then the next day he's like, I've become a monster, I need to leave this planet.
And I think that for me was a big part of it, is that it is a turning point in the book for character. It's not just in there for, there's a specific reason that Le Guin included this scene of assault, and it's to show the kind of character depths to which Shevik had gone to go from this ideal society of kind of communal living to being so consumed with the idea of possessing that he's willing to violate kind of the core of his own philosophies, which is what he does, like, almost the minute it's done. Like, the minute he gets home and kind of sobers up, he, like Claire said, he calls himself a monster. He realizes that that is not the person he wants to be, that the place he is in is changing him in a bad way. So there's definitely growth that happens after that.
It's basically when he decides he can't, like, extend the hand of brotherhood to these people because they are changing him too much, right? Is that kind of what we got from that?
I think so, basically. Or, like, and because he realizes after that her behavior leading up to that event was sketchy, that there were some dubious things. And
I hate her as a character. She's awful. Which, like, I wish she had been a more fully formed character, and then I would probably, like, have different feelings about it. But she's very flat and basically just finds the man from the moon amusing and, like, uses him to, like, entertain her friends at a party. And then, like, shit goes down and she basically is unhappy, which I don't blame her for being unhappy with that. But she just, like, bails, and it's just all awful.
But also, like, it's not just that he realizes he can't extend the hand of brotherhood. It's more like he realizes that he came to Uras with one purpose, but they brought him there with a different purpose. And so from the beginning, they were on a completely different plane. And it's when he goes to see her, he realizes they don't want him to leave the compound. Like, when he goes to see her, he leaves the university campus and he doesn't think anything really of it so much. He just wants to leave to see the rest of the town because he's like, well, I've not seen that before.
Which, you know, is a totally normal thing.
Right, and when he comes back and he realizes how bothered everybody is by the fact that he left, he's like, maybe I'm going to go and explore and actually talk to people who are not, like, sanctioned by the university.
And that's a point at which, because there had been other people in his life kind of telling him, like, hey, the people who brought you here, like, they just want your brain. They just want you to do some science for them, for their military. They don't actually, like, care about you. But he keeps wanting to see the best in these people and kind of sticking to some of his more idealistic initial thoughts about creating this bridge of communication. And yeah, I think that's the point at which he realizes that like all those people who had been telling him those things knew more than he did, and like kind of knew what was up and could see what he couldn't. And it's very, I don't know, this entire book, I first read this book when I was like 18, and I was like, yeah, communism, socialism, let's just all live in community and it will be great. And then I read this book and I was like, slapped in the face by the real life practicalities.
Which is really interesting to me is that it was kind of the same experience for me. I read it for the first time when I was 21 or something like that. And whilst I was very much at the time like also rah-rah communism and socialism, now I see it a lot more as rah-rah anti-capitalism, which is, you know, it's not something that I generally feel about society, you know, so that makes sense to me. But I see it a lot more as like you have to stay on your guard. Like you can't decide that, well, now we're an anarchist society and we're fine. Like we aren't. It's not like we have this society. Like you have to keep working at it, and you have to keep deciding that this is who you are and this is where your moral compass is and this is how you want to live your life, and you have to keep modeling that day in and day out, because you end up with things like the old physicist guy who is like, oh, I will diminish your work and then I can take credit for myself.
Which, like, spoiler alert, is a thing in academia.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, at least Shevik's not a woman. Well, that would be worse.
I will say that was one thing about, as much as this book kind of puts forth some ideas, I think that this book got academia really well. Yeah, like, I think that if there's one thing this book really kind of like where it hit home the most, I was like, yeah, that like feeling of researching and locking yourself in your little research hole and like going down that spiral of like thinking you've proved it only to realize you're back where you started and you didn't, like, you just proved yourself in a circle.
Am I misremembering Le Guin has a background in academia?
No, I think she's a professor, isn't she?
I thought so. Like, I was like, this feels like deep in it. Like, someone who like has been there. Can we talk for a minute about the gender stuff in this book? Because, oh my god, everything about it just makes me so happy. Well, okay, not everything, because obviously you've got the shitty stuff down on the planet, and everything there is terrible. Whatever, up on the moon where the communists live.
That sounds like it should be a Cat Stevens song. That should be the first line in, like, The New Cats in the Cradle.
Perfection.
I would buy that.
There's basically no gender expectations at all, which is amazing, because they don't even separate names by gender. Everyone's name is assigned by, like, a supercomputer, which gives me so much joy when I read that. Because I forgot that since the last time I read this, and I was like, that's perfect. And leads to, like, one of my favorite gags in the whole book, where he's going down to the university on the planet and he's talking about his mentor, Gavarab. I have no clue how to say any of the names in this book at all. But his, like, old lady mentor, who is, like, a total badass, and he feels bad that he, like, met her so late in life because her brain was already she was getting a little senile when he met her. But he's talking about his mentor, and they're like, wait, she was a woman? Like, they had no idea. They thought it was a dude, and they think that, like, men are the only ones capable of doing these advanced physics that they do. But both of his mentors in the book, like, academically, that are any good, are women.
I was gonna say, the one that's a man is the one that, like, super fucks him over by
and
just,
has
like,
no original thoughts.
Thesis.
Well, and even the stuff that he publishes on the moon is, like, stuff that he basically just translated from the planet. I was like, that's horrible. But, like, who would know? No one would know. Horrible.
But also, that's the only, like, male academic mentor he has, so.
Which is garbage. Completely expected, because men can really be garbage in academia. Like,
well, and then it's great because then you have, like, these his wife, Tavek, not really wife because they don't get married. His partner and the mother to his children is a very different kind of mother and partner than his own mother was. So even within these kinds of rigid structures of society, there are variances in the people themselves, which I just thought was really interesting, because that's how humans work, and it's really nice to see that sometimes.
And it's really great because you don't have that many characters, but you still get to see kind of a fairly wide breadth of, you know, he's got his father that more or less raised him, even though he was in the communal raising facility quite a bit. You've got his mother, didn't really take care of him. She left to go on another posting and she couldn't come back. And then you've got Takver, and then you've got, like, his friend.
Oh, the one, what's his name? Dab, right? Dab.
Who they have not a romantic, but a sometimes sexual relationship, where I like that it's kind of implied everyone's like somewhere on the bisexual-ish spectrum, right? And it's like sometimes it's like reestablishing their relationship. They have sex and live together for a while, and then they're like, once they feel like they're back on good footing with each other, they move out again.
Which, like, can you imagine if that's how that worked? It's like, hey, I haven't seen you in like 10 years. Let's have sex and live together for a month.
Do you know, that made me think of Little Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, where you have that one species whose name now escapes me.
Syssix, the feather dinosaur or whatever, yeah.
Right, where that's kind of what they do. They have a lot of, like, just social kind of sex. But yeah, you have this character who's just, you know, it's just mentioned and not much is made of it, that, like, he has a sexual relationship with Shevek and he would like it to be also a romantic relationship. That's not what Shevek is into. Whatever, they can still be friends 10, 20 years later. And that's really nice. Like, you don't see a lot of fiction where people, you know what, one person, like, wants to have a certain relationship with you romantically and you're not into it, and you, like, tell them, and then it's like, yeah, well, whatever, it didn't happen,
still
it's
be
fine.
bros.
Like, that's a thing that happens to people in real life, and you never see that in books, because it always has to be this huge dramatic thing.
I always think of that thing in Twilight where there's just the empty pages with the months written on them because she's in, like, the catatonic coma. That's what I always think. It's just like October, November. And I'm like, girl, that is unhealthy.
I'm really proud of us name dropping Twilight in our first full episode of
I'm
the
just
podcast.
saying, no book captures horrible melodrama quite as succinctly as Twilight, man. But that's the thing. That's not what happens here. And it's so nice and refreshing because they're just like, do you wanna? Not really. Okay, fine,
I thought
cool.
it was incredibly fascinating and sort of traditionalist that Le Guin would, like, set up a society where, like, that's the kind of, like, romantic and sexual norms you have. And Shevek and Takfur basically end up with a very, like,
kind of heteronormative,
traditional family where they're raising their kids kind of more at home than at the center, and they're a man and a woman basically, and it's just, like, quotes normal, you know. And it's kind of interesting that she went there instead of any of the other relationships that he has throughout the book.
Although, to be fair, they are mostly raising their children more at home than at the center, because the kids at the center start to bully Sadek. So
yeah, after a point.
Yeah.
But I do think, because I think that it's, what's interesting is because of the world Le Guin has created, she's actually making a very subversive choice, because their kind of nuclear, all the scare quotes, normal family is kind of in contrast to the traditional way that families in that society are established. So, like, even though to us it does read very kind of like, you know, heteronormative and
it's actually super
and very traditional. Yeah, it's actually, in the context of that planet, like, still a very kind of subversive and anarchic choice to make.
Because it's their individual choice, because it's what they have decided to do. They can still do it. They can move, they can go somewhere else, they can accept one posting, decline another. They can do it, really, you know. It's just, you have to decide what level of ease you're going to have. If you want to go with what most people are doing, it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think that's, or at least how I read it, that's where Shevek is when he goes home. Like, he's realized, like, he's willing to kind of, he just wants his family, and he's kind of willing to deal with more of that, like, ostracism or less, like, academic freedom or whatever in exchange for having his partner and his daughter with him. Or at least that's how I read it when he's going home with those empty hands. Like
with obvious complex feelings, but yeah.
Yeah, the way that I read it was more like he thought that he would have a lot more freedoms when he went to Uras to, like, do his work, and he's realized that he wasn't seeing the whole picture because he didn't know enough about the context. And now that he sees the whole picture, he can decide, like, yes, there's going to be limitations on me whatever I do, and these are the limitations that I choose. And I think it made a lot of sense in terms of, like, you know what, no one on this planet thinks even, like, remotely like I do, and it's really uncomfortable to always have to do this, like, code switching of reminding yourself that, like, here are some rando things that, like, these people care about that I have to conceptualize for, like, 10 minutes before I can, like
deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that's why I liked it, because that's how real life works. I mean, there's no way to live your life without some kind of constraints based on you, and it's just a matter of deciding which of those constraints and priorities and kind of goals are the ones you're going to give credence to and which ones you're just not, and you're willing to deal with the consequences.
Do we want to talk about, like, the actual, like, quote plot here? Like, what actually happens? Because we've kind of been just talking around it about how interesting everything is. So the main character, Shevik, is a physicist. Like, at the most basic, he is a physicist who feels like since they are cut off from basically everyone else, he cannot do his full work. So they do periodic communication with the planet, and that planet also now has communication with several other planets, including us. The Terrans are us, which makes me really happy. And there's like a nice little nod to Einstein where they're like, it's several hundred years old now, but very interesting, like, compared to the stuff that we're doing. And then there's also Hain, which is where the name of this, like, series the book is from, Hainer Cycle, comes from, which we don't know much about them other than, like, they're so far beyond us and also super peaceful. But the way that he actually ends up escaping once he's down on the planet is by going to the Terran embassy, right?
Because it's sovereign soil. Embassy and they, like, smuggle him out,
They smuggle him out on their ship. So, like, at the end, he is managing to, like, get their message out and his science out through us, which is cool.
Yeah, because the whole science subplot is that he's been working up to this theory that would possibly allow for faster than light travel, and he's been coming up to building this theory for years and years.
Yeah.
And he can't finish it on his moon, both because he can't really print
he just
the
needs
work,
more resources.
but he needs more resources. He goes down to the planet and he thinks he's going to, like, extend the hand of brotherhood, like you were saying before, and, like, work all together and do great science, and they just want the government of the country that he ends up going to on Uras, which, like, for him, the government of, like, a country within a planet is already, like, a super foreign thing that he doesn't even understand.
He does not get it at all.
That government just wants to secure the faster than light technology before other governments so that they can use it in, you know, military endeavors.
And he doesn't even write anything down for them to find, which I thought was so badass. Like, because he was cognizant enough to, like, know he should not put anything out where, like, they could find it and use it without his knowing.
And restrict it from everybody else, because then, you know, that, like, private ownership...
Darn proprietarians.
Yeah, exactly. Private ownership of an idea is just so wrong.
But then in the end, he releases it in this way that is just so full of anarchy.
He decides to give it to Tara on the, like, in exchange for his passage home, but only on the condition that they spread it around and they give it to everybody. I mean, it's basically like Natasha and the S.H.I.E.L.D. files.
Basically. The idea being that, if the Terrans then can spread it out, no one planet can use it against another planet. Like, if one can use it, they can all use it against each other, or nobody can use it for bad things, or it just cuts off the legs of that governmental entity he was working for. And I was just like, fuck yeah!
So, like, the sci-fi nerds listening, this thing that we're talking about, that his, like, formula, it's basically what's going to make the Ansible possible, which is the thing where you have, like, faster than light, or...
like, instantaneous communication.
Which has basically been adopted as, like, bog standard in today's science fiction. Like, if you read like Orson Scott Card growing up and they were talking about the Ansible, like, that's what this is from. It's from this. Like,
I have literally never read anything that referenced it, so I'm like, oh, is that a thing that happens in other books?
It's in some, like, Card and some Asimov, and some of the Heinlein stuff, like, makes references to it.
I have not read a lot of old-timey dude.
That's okay. Old white guys,
you lived your life better than us, Claire. You lived your life better than us.
It's because my mother decided that it would be a really good idea to give her 11-year-old Anne McCaffrey.
Well.
Because she's real French, my mother is.
I mean, it wasn't like Clan of the Cave Bear, so I mean, you have that.
She also gave me that.
My mom gave me The Mists of Avalon, which I loved.
She also gave me that.
Zimmer Bradley. And then I was like, hard pass. Childhood favorites ruined.
I love that. I said one thing that I read as a young teenager that was wildly inappropriate, and you named two others that, like, oh, at least it's better than those. It's like, no, my mother
No.
also gave me those too.
That's amazing.
okay.
That's amazing. See, my mom is not a reader. She did not give me anything. My dad is the one who gave me all of my books. So, like,
Yeah.
I read lots of white dude science fiction in high school and junior high. It's unfortunate.
I read a lot of V.C. Andrews. My mom's a big V.C. Andrews reader. So,
Okay.
But then I wanted something different. So I found the Hugo lists, and that's what I started
Beautiful.
working from. Also full of old dead white guys.
Yeah.
And Ursula K Le Guin.
And Ursula Le Guin and Octavia
Ursula Le
Butler.
Guin.
Like, that's it.
I mean, this is one of those, the Dispossessed, I mean, you know, we're like gushing about it.
It won, like,
because
everything.
It's so beautiful. But it's one of those rare few that has actually won the Hugo and the Nebula in the same year because it was so fantastic. And
The Locust,
I
right?
love it.
Yes, I think so. But yeah, definitely one of those things you can point to when people tell you that there's just no good early classic female science fiction. Air quotes around classic science fiction.
Also, oh no, why is there now politics in my sci-fi? It never used to be this way.
It's like, I don't know what those people were reading or watching, but it was not...
It's old white guys reading old white guys.
Because of confirmation bias, because it confirms what they were already thinking. Because if I read old white guy science fiction novels, some of them I'm going to feel like this is very politically against me as a person.
Oh, absolutely. If you're one of those, I don't like politics in my books, this may not be the future podcast for you.
This is definitely not the
Just
podcast
saying
for
that.
you.
This is probably not gonna be the podcast for you. All right. Anything else? Is there anything else big about the Dispossessed that we wanted to talk about?
I'm so sad because I bookmarked on my Kindle a dick joke in this book. Okay, so it wasn't a joke, but it was like this beautiful use of language that was like kind of, you know, like subtle
Jokish.
enough, like subtle enough that you do a bit of a double take and you're like, oh, I see what you did there, Ursula. So this is when he can't work. The work came first, but it went nowhere. Like sex, it ought to be a pleasure, and it wasn't. He kept grinding over the same problems. It's like, yes, beautiful.
You can't see me, but I'm like making a really lecherous face and like doing a fist pump right now. I'm always surprised by how funny Le Guin stuff is because like it's fundamentally very serious.
Yes.
And like the prose is always very elegant, even if it can like tend towards being spare. But she's also hilarious. Like she is
Yeah,
the
it's very
master of the like sly joke that like it's easy to skip over if you're not focusing on what you're reading, which you should always be focusing on what you're reading when you're reading Le Guin because it's so great. But you know, if you're just like skimming, you can miss that stuff and that'd be a shame.
Also, privacy, in fact, was almost as desirable for physics as it was for sex. But all the same, was it necessary?
Yes, that's the one I underlined. It says like Shevik likes to bone in
Beautiful.
public.
He so does.
Shevik's got voyeurism kink. Good for him.
Beautiful.
A plus.
No king shaming on this podcast.
No king shaming on the podcast. I
No, not
found
at
one
all.
of I have like 3 favorite passages in this book, but this one is maybe my favorite where he's talking about like what Anaris is really like. But it's not wonderful. It is an ugly world, not like this one. Anaris is all dusty and dry heels, all meager, all dry. And the people aren't beautiful. They have big hands and feet like me and the waiter over there, but not big bellies. They get very dirty and take baths together, and nobody here does that. The towns are very small and dull. They are dreary. No palaces. Life is dull and hard work. You can't always have what you want or even what you need because there isn't enough. You Erasti have enough. Enough air, enough rain, grass, oceans, food, music, buildings, factories, machines, books, clothes, history. You are rich, you own. We are poor, we lack. You have, we do not have. Everything is beautiful here, only not the faces. On Anaris, nothing is beautiful, nothing but the faces. The other faces, the men and women. We have nothing but that, nothing but each other. And I'm just like, we have nothing but each other. And like, it's super emotional and like, it keeps going. But like, it's just, how do you, like, you have everything, but you have nothing is basically what he's telling these people, which is just like my poor heart here.
And that resonates with me a lot because when you hear kind of this type of language, it's very specific. It reminds me a lot of like a bunch of different like protest songs from the history of the labor movement. And you know, I don't know the English because I don't think there's, I mean, I don't know, but like in the French version of the Internationale, there is literally a line that says, "We are nothing, let us be all." And that's, you know, it goes to that. And it's like we were saying before, he always has empty hands, because it's not about the possessions, it's about people who have the same mindset.
There's the repeated, the empty hands, and he wants to take down walls, which, like, the opening of this book where they're talking about how the wall is the most important thing in the world, and I'm just like, oh my god, yes, we need to tear down walls, and we need to come to each other with open hands, and ugh.
It was a very weird connection, but the opening with the description of the wall reminded me a lot of Stardust by Neil Gaiman, because that's how that book opens, is with the description of the wall in this town. And while the books are very different, like the books are very different, there's still this idea of the magic of a different place all depends on which side of the wall you're standing on. And that, to me, when I underlined that same passage that you read, Kay, what stuck out to me was he starts out by being almost very denigrative of his hometown and and you know, he's not forgiving
ugly and
or
dirty and
kind. Yeah, they're dirty, it's ugly, they're you know, they're small, it's not
we
regal,
don't have
but
things.
Yeah, we don't have things. But even in this kind of ugliness, being on this quote side of the wall that is so ugly, he's still able to peel all of that back and show that the ugliness only goes as far as the aesthetic, but that underneath there's this difference that you can't see from the other side of the wall. Like if you are only on Urus looking at Anarus, you're only going to see from that side of the wall, and it goes both ways. So like you were saying, that's why that kind of building of the wall combines with that metaphor of bridging, and it just keeps coming up in a way that's really powerful every time Le Guin uses it.
Yeah, there's also that repeated kind of reference to, like, when they are looking at the moon, depending on which, if you're on the planet or you're on the moon, and ours, you're, you know, you're looking at your moon, but it's also where the other people are living, and like some things are only beautiful from far away. I just love this book.
I have a thing that I want to bring up, but I'm like, if I bring this up, it's going to be so much longer. In the book, like, they have this famine at some point,
which is the impetus for him being separated. When he's separated from his family, not only because of the work, but because there's this giant, basically like worldwide famine.
And his partner does research in algae, which is a major foodstuff for them. So she's sent to kind of do some emergency research to help alleviate the famine. And so
but there's no work for him.
Yeah, and there's no work for him because he does like physics and stuff, which is not really going to help feed people. So they get to that idea of the greater good versus the individual.
But they both choose to go for that. They both choose to go for that. Like, he goes and asks for posting in the town when she is, but because that town has nothing but a research center, they don't need him there, and he chooses to go elsewhere.
Am I remembering that?
Like, he can't even like empty the wastebasket. It's like there's nothing there for him to do.
But he chooses to. He could just have gone and been like a bum around there to be with her, but he chooses not to because people are dying. And like,
and you take an emergency posting if you truly believe in the maxims of their society, and right.
If you truly believe in Odo, who was a woman, that's another really interesting.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Like, another really interesting gender thing is that they've taken this like Marx figure and made her a woman. I say they, I mean Le Guin, obviously.
It's great.
Basically, all of his figures he looks up to are these women. Amazing women, which like both gives me life and kills me, if that like means anything to you, because it's amazing. And like, I'm trying to picture any of the men I know in science saying, oh yeah, basically everyone who I look up to in my field, or just as like a life person that I want to model my life after, is a woman. Like, I can't, no.
That may not be them. That may be lack of cognizant ability to do that. I mean, through systemic problems, if there are no other women in your field for whom you can admire or to whom you can look up to, like, that becomes that echo chamber of, like, obviously you don't have female role models when there are no female role models in your field to have.
By the way, so none of us are women in STEM, but we're all really for women in STEM fields, okay?
Yes, please. Yes, please. That about wraps up everything we wanted to talk about for The Dispossessed by Ursula K Le Guin. Thank you guys so much for joining us for our convo. Before we say our official goodbyes, we're just going to go ahead and mention a couple of things all of us have on the burner. For me, I just put up the newest episode of the Magical Space Pussycats podcast. I will link to that in the show notes. So yeah, that just went live, and we should have another one recording here in another week or two. What are you working on, Claire?
I'm working on my BookTube channel as ever, which is under my full name, Claire Russo, and there'll be a link in the description box below. And I'm also really excited because I only have like 5 days of work left before I have a nice long 2-week holiday for Christmas and New Year and my birthday, and I'm gonna do all the reading. I have to read like 25 more books for my Goodread goals, so that's great.
Oh,
Oops.
comics, graphic novels, baby.
Totally. Totally.
My turn? Okay, so couple things. I've got a couple Book Riot pieces that are going to be coming up probably by the time this comes out. Like, the one that will definitely be out is I did 10 completed romance series for people who wanted to, like, do a binge read of a series that's already done.
That's
so
you
we've
and
got
me,
that.
Claire.
Excited.
Right, so, like,
Our
we'll
alley.
definitely link that. And then I'm also have an ongoing project just on Twitter, and I'm eventually moving that over to my blog also, which is just K Taylor Ray on Dreamwit. I'm doing the Trek Wreck a Day project, which basically started out as bros were being cranky about the new Star Trek show this summer. This goes back to August. Bros were being cranky about the diversity in their space show stuff, which I don't know what they were watching, but it wasn't Star Trek, okay? So I'm like, I'm just going to blast this fandom with positivity. So I have been posting a Star Trek fan fiction rec every single day since August 11th.
Yes.
So I don't know when this podcast exactly is going live, but it'll probably be like 150 recs by then. And I'm planning on posting every day until the new show comes out. We'll see if that actually happens, because the show was originally supposed to start airing in January and it got moved to like May. But as of right now, there are at least 125 Star Trek fanfiction.
And that is a wonderful project.
Yeah.
I've read several of them. I can highly stand. I will give my stamp of approval. There are several good fics there being wrecked.
I am not yet in Star Trek fandom, but I can vouch for Kay's recommendations in general.
Yes. So that was all we had to share about our projects coming up. The next book we're going to be discussing is going to be Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. I finally got it right, guys. That took like 3 tries for me to just get the name right of that book. It's a graphic novel we've all read before, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a reread for everybody. Same. This is not going to be just a reread podcast, we promise. But these first 2 were both things we read before.
Have all read, yeah.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks, right? Is that what we decided? We're
Yep,
Yeah,
so we will
fortnightly.
see you in 2 weeks.
Yep, sounds good. Until then.
Really
Oh, God,
fail
okay.
at signing off.
Okay.
Like,
Okay. I'm just going to say goodbye and then stop my recording.
okay.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Sisterhood of the Traveling Paperbacks, a podcast made by 3 online besties and all-around lady nerds. Channel art provided by Claire Russo. Music credits to Malt Shop Bot by Kevin MacLeod. You can get in touch with the Sisterhood at paperbackssisterhoodpodcast@gmail.com, at paperbackspod on Twitter, or at our website paperbacksisters.wordpress.com. You can reach Kay at @KTaylorRay on Twitter, Claire at @Claire Russo, and Chelsea at @An Outlaw Life. Additional credits, show notes, and transcripts will be available on our website. Thank you so much for listening.
No paperbacks were harmed in the making of this program.